Pray, for devils have no reason. Satan waits to curse your ways. Have you seen it in his eyes in the sunset? Have you wondered if he's laughing when he plays? Kansas. The Devil Game. This is a set of instructions for how to speak with the devil, which, as those of you with any sort of brains at all might note, is a patently moronic proposition on the face of it, likely to culminate in any number of thoroughly unpleasant fates. Honestly, it would probably be smarter to publish your credit card number on Facebook or take up a career in crocodile wrestling, but then that isn't going to stop you, is it? Not if you're sincerely interested, at least. Technically, if you do everything just right, there's a fair chance you'll walk away scot-free. And that seems to be reason enough for some people to decide that it's a good idea, especially if you're the fate-tempting, thrill-seeking, scare-junkie type, or the desperate type. Which brings me to a point of clarification I ought to make. This is not a manual for making any sort of Faustian bargain. You know, the whole sell your soul type of deal. Although, if you happen to bring it up in conversation, he certainly wouldn't be one to refuse. Following through with such a foolhardy bargain, however, would necessitate removing some of the protections which you will put in place for your conversation, and I don't think I need to spell out for you why that would be a bad idea. If you're really mathematically impaired enough to want to trade something that will last an infinite number of years for something that might last 90 tops, there are plenty of other rituals out there for you to follow. This one, if performed correctly, should only allow the two of you to talk. This perhaps begs the question of why exactly you would want to speak with the devil in the first place. Maybe some of you just like the idea of making small talk with extremely dangerous occult entities, but for the sake of the human race, I hope most of you aren't quite that stupid. The short answer is he knows things. Things that some of you may have a deep vested interest in finding out. I mean, he's not omniscient or anything, much as he might like to pretend otherwise. He's not God. But he's definitely got a supernatural advantage over the kind of knowledge any human would be able to obtain. For example, he probably wouldn't be able to predict when the next world war will happen, or tell you the cure for cancer. But he could very well be able to predict the winning numbers of tomorrow's $500 million Powerball drawing, or tell you what deadly, undiagnosed condition might be afflicting one of your loved ones. Of course, the Prince of Darkness doesn't just go around giving out winning lottery numbers to anybody who asks. Trusting any sort of information obtained from a being commonly described as the Father of Lies is liable to land you in a worse situation than you were in when you started. However, if you're really dead set on finding something out and you've exhausted all your other options, there is a way to get accurate information out of the guy. You see, like so many of the more urbane villains in pop culture, the devil has a penchant for games and gambling. Of course, the reason he likes them so much is he almost always wins, unless you happen to be a fiddler named Johnny, or being represented by Daniel Webster. You're probably going to get your ass handed to you. But if you're determined enough to want to face the risks and the long odds, there's a certain game you two could play to try to win the information you need. First things first, though. We'll start off with a description of the summoning process, then get into the rules of the game, some tips for how to play, and finally, of course, the inevitable litany of arcane shit that might go horribly wrong. In order to contact your conversational partner, you'll need to go to a church at midnight. It doesn't matter what kind of church, large, small, old, new, liberal, conservative, as long as you're sure that it'll be empty. The last thing you want is for some preacher to walk in on you while you're in the middle of this, for the sake of the preacher's well-being, as much as your own. The process will probably work best if you try it on a new moon, or a full moon, or Friday the 13th, or Halloween. The actual day is less important than the psychological effect it has on you. As long as you don't try it on Christmas Eve or something stupid like that, you should be fine. The time is important, though. You don't have to start or end your ritual at exactly 12 a.m. Greenwich Atomic Time or anything, but as a general rule of thumb, you ought to show up a bit before midnight and have everything set up no later than 10 or 15 after. Show up a lot before midnight if you don't know how you're going to get in. Shockingly enough, most houses of God do tend to lock their doors at night, at least if there's no one there to watch over them. And remember, we want it empty. Got it? There are, of course, certain things you need to bring, and certain things you can't bring. For this ritual, you will need a full can of salt. You won't need to use it all, but it's always better to have more than you need than to have less. 7 candles, red or white being preferable. Something to light the candles with. God, you'd be shocked how often people forget this. Occult ritual or not, they're not gonna magically light themselves. A length of red string, rope, yarn, or thread. A full-length floor or wall mirror. Ideally, you'll want to find one of these already present in the church. They're a bit unwieldy to be lugging around during a break-in, you see. However, if there really aren't any there, you'll have to bring your own. You might also find it useful to bring some markers, pencils, paper, flashlight, any sort of tools that might be necessary to secure your entrance to the church. You will not be permitted to bring in any electronic or time-keeping devices. This includes all cell phones, smartphones, tablets, e-readers, MP3 players, PDAs, calculators, wristwatches, pocket watches, kitchen timers, hourglasses, etc., etc., etc. Seriously, it's worse than the SAT. If you're one of those people that has to have your smartphone, it's practically wired into your brain, don't worry. You can bring those things with you to the church, as long as you leave them outside the room in which you'll be doing the ritual. If you brought a flashlight, helpful for finding your way around without attracting unwanted attention, leave it outside too. Also, don't bring in any sort of religious paraphernalia to protect you, especially if it pertains to the Abrahamic religions. And yes, those gothy black cross earrings you're wearing hanging upside down, they count. If you have any kind of holy symbols like that with you, the devil will simply refuse to show up. Don't worry, you're not going in totally unprotected. In fact, most of the supplies with you are not for any sort of devil summoning ritual, but for your own protection. Old superstitions and folk magic remedies guard oneself from evil. From what I know of it, the effect's mostly based on the power of belief, so there are probably numerous other objects, artifacts, and procedures that would work just as well. If you'd like to risk being left helpless at the mercy of the devil in order to test that theory, be free to experiment. However, for anyone without a psychotic death wish, I'd recommend sticking to the ritual as follows. Once you're sure you have all the right supplies with you, make your way into the church and find some place to set up. It can be anywhere, from the main sanctuary, where services are held, to a Sunday school classroom, to a walk-in supply closet, as long as you have sufficient room and are certain not to be disturbed. Set up your mirror first. This is where the devil will appear when you summon him. As such, you mustn't complete the summoning until you've laid down certain wards around it. First, surround the mirror with an unbroken circle of salt. If the mirror is hanging on a wall or door, lay down a semicircle around instead, making sure the salt touches the wall at both ends. Then wrap your red string around the mirror several times. The color red, especially red string, is symbolic of protection in the folklore of many cultures and religions. This is also why red candles are a good idea. Speaking of candles, Set them up around the outside of your circle or semicircle of salt, spaced at relatively even intervals. No, you do not have to get out a measuring tape and make it exactly perfect, but do try, at least, to make it look as though it was set up by someone old enough to be trusted with matches. Light the candles in a clockwise fashion, being careful not to disturb the salt. If you break the circle, you'll have to start over again. Once all the candles are lit and burning strongly, your protective wards are complete. You are now ready to proceed to the actual summoning. To do so, you must first get the devil's attention and demonstrate your resolve by performing some sort of sacrilegious act in the holy space. Turning a crucifix or cross upside down is fairly conventional, but it's not the only option. For example, I know of a kid who once fulfilled this requirement by scribbling obnoxious graffiti all over a painting of Jesus hanging in his Sunday school classroom. The nice thing about turning a cross upside down is that once you finish your encounter, assuming you survived it in one piece, you can just flip it right side up again and no one's the wiser, sidestepping a relatively minor but still irritating risk of having your Sunday school turn into a reenactment of the Spanish Inquisition for the next month and a half. After you've finished doing whatever offensive thing you've decided on, shut all doors to the room and turn off all the lights, so that the space is lit only by the candles. Face the mirror and stare deeply into it, concentrating on your desired outcome. There are no incantations, no arcane strings of Latin you have to recite. Just look into the mirror and wish as hard as you can for the devil to appear there. After a few moments of this, when you feel ready, close your eyes. Count to 10. Then open them. If all has gone correctly, you will no longer see your own reflection. You will be looking at the devil, or at least looking at the way the devil has chosen to appear to you. Chances are, he won't look like your conventional red-horned demon with goat legs and a pitchfork, nor any other sort of terrible apparition. No point in scaring you off now. Better to lure you in, make you feel safe. To that end, he generally takes on the appearance of a fairly average, nondescript human being. If anything, he's prone to vanity, and will lean towards the more attractive end of the spectrum. The only really frightening part of him will be the eyes. No matter how hard he tries, he can't hide the sinister gleam smoldering deep within them, the malevolent amusement and hunger, like the eyes of a spider contemplating a fly struggling in its web. They're supremely confident, those eyes. Confident and without pity. Don't look into them too deeply, or you'll begin to feel helpless and paralyzed with dread, losing your hope and your will to fight. Since you'll probably be just standing there staring at him in shock for a few moments, having on some level expected the ritual to fail, he'll initiate the conversation by asking what it is you desire from him. If you can gather your wits enough to string together a coherent sentence, you should reply with something like, "I wish to challenge you in a game of question and response." Even if you don't get the words exactly right, he'll know what you mean and accept your request on a wide, predatory grin of anticipation. He's been playing this game for a long time, you see, and he's very good at it. Most humans, on the other hand, are very bad at it. This gives him a chance to, at the very least, thoroughly mess with your mind. And at the most, well, we'll save that for the litany of shit that could go wrong. You'll have plenty. Well, we'll save that for the litany of shit that could go wrong. You'll have to play it very smart to avoid justifying his expectation.